All right, welcome back to the Great and Spacious Building. I'm your host, Dr. Wayne Denton. So today, our big question is going to be, how did explanations for the racial priesthood ban change going into the 20th century? So far to this point, with the episodes that we've had in this Race in the Priesthood series, we've talked about a singular explanation, that being the curse of Cain, and this gets morphed a little bit into including the curse of Ham through his wife Egyptus. Essentially, what we have are bloodlines linking to these biblical and extra biblical figures, providing a justification for the ban. Obviously, Cain in the Bible kills his brother Abel, and Cain receives a mark, whatever that is going to be. But the explanation used by LDS leaders and other thinkers of the day include the idea that the mark is going to be black skin. Cain's mark equals black skin. And with that, individuals in today's life, or the life of these early Mormons, as they're trying to understand why some people are white, why some people are black, what that means, how it relates to the priesthood, the explanation becomes that individuals with a black skin are descendants from Cain or descendants from Ham and Egyptus, and that's going to be it. Their curse subjects them to being banned from receiving the priesthood and temple blessings. That's where we're at so far. We're going to head into the 20th century today. We're going to look at some criticisms of that thought process, and we're going to look at where a new thought process comes from. It's actually not something new in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It's going to be something that comes from around the time that the priesthood ban is likely being developed in the minds of the Quorum of the 12 and specifically Brigham Young. So let's hop into the criticisms. First off, Theodore Weld, he's a well-known abolitionist from this time period, the mid to early 19th century, and he's going to directly address the idea of the curse of Cain, and he points out the hypocrisy of the claim. If Cain survived the flood, when we're talking about the flood, we're talking about, Noah's Ark, and apparently Noah and his family are the only ones that survive, and they're the progenitors of the rest of human civilization from that point on. But if Cain survived the flood, then that's, one heck of a miracle. Why doesn't the Bible tell us that? And the question here is, in order for the priesthood curse to be passed down, Cain has to survive. Because if Cain is eliminated and all of his descendants are eliminated in the flood, then there are no descendants of Cain. So in order for there to be black individuals who are black because of the curse of Cain, that meant that Cain or descendants of Cain had to survive the flood, which is not mentioned in the Bible. So this would be one heck of a miracle. If God is willing to grant that miracle, how could slaveholders then twist that to enslave the people that God saved? So who's right and who's wrong? Cain is obviously pretty important for God to save him in an unmentioned miracle, an unrecorded miracle, but now slaveholders are enslaving the people that were saved by God. In short, this is meant to just show the nonsensical nature of this argument in both spiritual, biblical, and intellectual ways. In order to create this curse, you need to really create an extra biblical narrative that isn't supported by the Bible itself. We're going to get further with this. So between 1865 and 1870, one of the biggest blows to this whole curse of these individuals being cursed and not equal naturally, all of these things, is between 1865 and 1870, the U.S. government, they're going to ratify the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, and legally, blacks are now granted political equality, at least federally, because we obviously have Jim Crow laws in states where they're going to make state laws taking advantage of the 10th Amendment in order to legally make it so blacks won't be equal and don't have access to the same opportunities despite these three amendments. So we have the government moving in a direction that is oppositional to the view held by Mormons and their views of blacks. Adding on to this, 1874, William Wells Brown, he points out, he's going to continue to point out the hypocrisy of this curse of Cain narrative, and he poses an argument based on the Bible. So he's going to look straight at the Bible and pose an argument, and, he wants people that are proliferating this curse to answer this question. If one truly believes in the Bible and the flood, so if you're hold on to the fundamental view of what's written in the Bible is true. If you're if you believe that there's truth there and you believe in the flood, then there can't be a black race as a sign of a curse. Noah, who is the progenitor of the world's race after the flood, did not descend from Cain. If you follow Noah's bloodline through the many mentions of it in the Old Testament, he did not descend from Cain, he descended from Seth, and therefore there is no logical explanation because there are no descendants of Cain. Logically speaking, this is the nail in the coffin for the arguments supporting the curse of Cain. Logically speaking, if we're using the Bible as a text to prove or disprove this claim, the Bible itself has disproved the claims. Then how could the Mormons keep up the curse? How could they continue with the ban for black members and hold them as, not able to receive the priesthood? How are they able to do this? Well, they can thank the Orsons. When I say the Orsons, I mean Orson Hyde and Orson Pratt. If we rewind a little bit to April 27th, 1845, Orson Hyde, he's giving a speech in front of the High Council in Nauvoo. This is after Joseph Smith's death. And there's a conversation going on about, how do we explain the difference between blacks and whites and all of these different races? Where do these things come from? And he reasons that black skin could be explained by a difference of experience in the premortal life. What that difference in experience isn't explicitly stated here, but someone's going to come along and they're going to make that statement for him in a couple of years. And it's important to note he is not justifying a priesthood ban at this point, but instead he's seeking to explain the differences in race. We don't have that scientific explanation for the difference in melanin in individual skin, so this is trying to explain this using spiritual means for things that individuals just didn't understand yet. So now we're going to see this thought process be developed a little bit further by Orson number 2, or Orson Pratt. On August 29th, 1852, when speaking about the priesthood ban, again, the priesthood ban had been implemented February of that year, 1852, so this is a couple months down the line. We've got Orson Pratt offering up a solution that's going to help the church overcome the reliance on the curse of Cain. It's important to note, Brigham Young really liked the curse of Cain explanation. Therefore, Orson Pratt offering this explanation here that I'm going to talk about, Brigham Young doesn't pick up on this and be like, that's brilliant, let's replace the curse of Cain. No, Brigham Young's going to talk about the curse of Cain throughout his term as church president until he dies for the most part. But Orson Pratt is laying the seeds here that once the curse of Cain has been discredited enough, the church has some place to go to explain the priesthood ban. And he's going to say that blacks were simply from a degraded parenthood. Their premortal life was one where they did not act in a valiant manner. However, God being good to all, he offered them a physical body, albeit their physical body is going to be marked to notate their lack of valiance in the premortal existence. Therefore, we're moving away. This is not a curse, a biblical curse. This is a premortal mark given to individuals whose spirits were not fully on board at the start to support Jesus's plan of free will and letting people make choices. Instead, they may have been on the fence. That's a term that gets applied when talking about this. Blacks may have been fence sitters in the premortal life, meaning they wanted to see how things were going to play out. And when it looked like Jesus was going to win this spiritual war with Satan, they decided to jump in on the winning side and get the benefits from that. The benefits being they're going to receive a physical body. So this explanation, the roots for it are truly set here. As I had mentioned earlier, despite this explanation, Brigham Young still preferred the biblical curse explanation, and therefore during his time there's very little to be said about the premortal explanation. In 1880, two pieces of Mormon literature are going to pop up, and they're going to start to reference the premortal explanation for the ban. And these aren't church leaders at all. These are actually going to be two females. Emily Spencer, who's going to write a book of poetry. She's going to reference the premortal existence explanation, the lack of valiance of blacks in explaining why individuals have black skin. And Fanny Stenhouse, in her book, An English Woman in Utah, she's going to also address the church's view about race, and she's going to rely on the premortal existence explanation for why some people are black, why some people are white, and why individuals are banned from certain ordinances in the church. The premortal explanation for the ban is going to be passed along through the 19th and 20th centuries. Church leaders such as George F. Richards, John Whitstow, and even the eventual prophet David O. McKay are going to refer to the premortal explanation as the reason for the priesthood ban. This is going to really be related to a shift in church culture at this time. After Joseph Smith has died, after Brigham Young has died, after the issue of polygamy has been settled and the church has sort of moved away from that practice of polygamy via the two documents that are officially going to end it by 1905, the church is in a state where it's trying to organize things. It's trying to routinize its practices. It's trying to get all in order, what will eventually be called correlation. They're trying to correlate their teachings. John Whitstow, he's an interesting individual. He's a scientist by trade. He writes a book called Joseph Smith's The Scientist. And he's really going to delve into this routinization. How do we explain the unexplainable? How do we move away from this charismatic ideology of, well, miracles just happen, to being able to explain stuff in a naturalistic world? As the United States is moving into their progressive era and relying more on naturalistic explanations, moving away from the fantastical of the religious experience, individuals in the early 20th century in the church are going to try to do that same thing with the church's teachings itself. This biblical curse that can easily be explained away by just reading the text of the Bible no longer serves the purpose of explaining why the church is banning black individuals from certain ordinances. Therefore, to rely on this piece of doctrine of the premortal life, of which it is not available in the Bible, it's truly only available in the creation and the teachings of Joseph Smith and later expounded on by later prophets. But this is truly a Mormon thing. Therefore, it cannot be disproven by somebody just looking to use the Bible. It can't be disproven by any empirical research. Instead, it's truly a faith-based narrative. Believers are going to latch onto it because it came from the original prophet, for explaining to your own people and linking a story together that can be supported by church doctrine. The premortal existence becomes the gold standard for the church to support and defend their priesthood ban. It is important to note that Joseph F. Smith and Joseph Fielding Smith, despite this movement to use the premortal existence and the lack of valiance of black souls as an explanation, those two individuals do hold tightly to the curse of Cain, with it being an explanation that came from the prophet Brigham Young as the baseline for why the priesthood ban was put in place. The Joseph Fielding Smith and Joseph F. Smith are both going to rely on that explanation. They're not going to latch onto this premortal existence explanation, largely because they're protecting the old guard for the most part. They want to hold on to these traditional ways of thinking and not move away from them. But in order for the church to remain seen as sort of a progressive faith, they really have to move away from what can easily be explained away, and therefore this premortal existence explanation provides them that way. So this is actually going to lead us into our next episode, where we're going to discuss an individual named Lowry Nelson. Lowry Nelson, a faithful member of the church. Interestingly enough, he's like many Mormons at this time, and while the premortal existence is being talked about as a background for the priesthood ban, not many everyday LDS members know that. It's being talked about in the highest levels, but it's not being passed down to the local churches. And Lowry Nelson, he's going to hear about this for the first time, and he's got some thoughts that he's going to share with the brethren, which leads to a really heated exchange and will make for a fun back and forth episode next week. So thank you guys for tuning in. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel if you like what you saw. Check out some videos from the past. There'll be a playlist that pops up for this Race in the Priesthood series. Give this video a like. Comment below if you have something to add or questions that you want to discuss in the comments section. And be sure to have yourselves a great day.